They never imagined that the man behind the bar, that silent old man who cleaned glasses with mechanical movements, had been one of the most feared operators of the MS-13. Neither did they know that on that night of Tuesday, the 14th of March, 2023, at 23:17, everything would change in the small diner, the refuge of Soyapango. Don Roberto, that is how everyone in the neighborhood knew him, felt the change in the air before the 6 shadows crossed the door of his cantina. The soccer match on the old television continued broadcasting, but the few customers who remained had already noticed the tension. It was that electricity in the environment that every Salvadoran recognizes, the prelude to danger. "Turn off the music," ordered a hoarse voice from the entrance. The cumbia that was playing from the jukebox was cut abruptly. In the sudden silence, only the distant comments of the sports narrator and the buzzing of the ceiling fan that turned lazily remained, moving the hot air and the smell of warm beer mixed with cheap disinfectant. The 6 men entered slowly, occupying the space as if it belonged to them. They wore loose white T-shirts, typical of the Moreros, the wide pants falling over worn sneakers. The leader, a guy of about 30 years old with the neck tattooed up to the jaw, approached the bar while the others dispersed strategically around the place. "We are looking for the ghost," said the leader, supporting his hands on the worn wooden bar. His knuckles showed the letters MS engraved with homemade ink. Don Roberto continued drying the glass between his hands without raising his gaze. On the wall behind him, between dusty bottles of Tic Tac and Suprema, hung faded photographs of soccer teams and an image of the Virgin of Guadalupe. "I do not know any ghost," responded with neutral voice. The Morero smiled, showing a gold tooth. "How strange, man, because they told us that he frequents this dump." One of the customers, a bricklayer who had entered for a last beer after work, tried to get up discreetly from his table. Before he could take 2 steps, one of the Moreros pushed him back to his chair. "No one moves," announced the leader, without turning, until what we are looking for appears. The fan continued turning, projecting intermittent shadows on the walls painted with faded green. Don Roberto noticed the sweat that beaded the bricklayer's forehead. He saw how the waitress, Doña Carmen, 60 years old, 3 children, shrank behind the counter of the cold pupusas. "Here only working people come," said Don Roberto, placing the clean glass in its place. "People who do not look for problems. And you?" The leader leaned over the bar, studying the old bartender. "What kind of people are you?" For the first time in 20 years, Don Roberto felt the weight of his past pressing against his ribs. The tattoo he carried on his chest, hidden under the work shirt, seemed to burn as if the ink remembered its original purpose. The 3 tears under his left eye, erased with laser but still visible as faint scars, pulsed with their own memory. "I am just an old man who serves beer," he responded. The Morero observed him for some eternal seconds. Then he straightened and snapped his fingers. His companions began to turn tables, emptying wallets, threatening with their faces but without showing weapons. It was the theater of terror that the MS-13 had perfected. Implicit violence, palpable fear. "Please," shouted a young woman who was dining with her boyfriend, "we have nothing to do with this." "Shut up," one of the Moreros cut her off. "Everyone has to do with everything in this neighborhood." Don Roberto observed the scene with an unnatural calm. He calculated distances, evaluated threats, considered options. Habits that he thought buried emerged like muscle reflexes. The pistol he kept under the cash register weighed on his conscience, but he knew that 6 against 1 were not good odds. Not at his age, not with innocence in the middle. "How much do you want?" he asked finally, "to leave my people in peace?" The leader smiled again. "It is not a matter of money, old man. It is a matter of finding what we are looking for." A cell phone vibrated. The leader took it out, looked at the screen, frowned. The conversation was brief, pure guttural affirmations. When he hung up, something had changed in his expression. "It seems that the ghost is close," he said, looking directly at Don Roberto. "Very close, outside." The distinctive sound of motorcycles approaching cut the night. It was not the casual purr of delivery pizzerias, it was the coordinated roar of several machines, the type of sound that preceded massacres in the news. The 6 Moreros exchanged nervous glances. The leader finally took out his weapon, a black Glock that shone under the fluorescent light. "You," he pointed to Don Roberto. "Come here." The old bartender rounded the bar space, each step measured. As he passed by the cash register, his hand brushed the edge of the counter, a gesture so casual that no one noticed. The motorcycles stopped outside. The engines turned off one by one, leaving a silence more terrifying than any noise. "If you are who I think you are," whispered the leader, pressing the barrel of the pistol against Don Roberto's ribs, "then you know that this is not going to end well." Don Roberto looked him in the eyes for the first time. At that moment, the leader saw something that made him take an involuntary step back. It was not fear that shone in the old man's eyes. It was something much worse. Resignation mixed with a glacial certainty. "It never ends well," responded Don Roberto in a low voice. "Never." The main door opened with a bang. What will happen in the next minutes will change everything. The figure that entered through the door was not what anyone expected. A woman of about 40 years old, dressed in jeans and a simple blouse, walked toward the center of the diner as if the 6 armed Moreros were part of the furniture. She wore her hair tied in a practical ponytail, and her empty hands hung relaxed at her sides. "Ramiro," she said, addressing the leader of the Moreros. "Your boss wants to see you." The atmosphere changed, instantly. If before there was tension, now there was confusion mixed with a different fear. The Moreros looked at each other, uncertain. The woman did not seem threatening, but her presence had altered the entire power dynamic in the room. "The shadow is outside?" asked Ramiro, lowering the weapon slightly. "5 motorcycles," confirmed the woman. "She says you have 3 minutes to leave with empty hands." Don Roberto observed the exchange with calculated interest. He knew that dynamic, the chain of command, the forced respect, the fear of superiors. The MS-13 was not just street violence, it was a structure, a hierarchy, where disobeying meant death. "But the ghost," began one of the Moreros. "The ghost is her problem now," cut the woman. Her voice had the flat tone of someone accustomed to transmitting orders that are not questioned. "You have already done enough mess for today." Ramiro clenched his jaw, the conflict evident in his tattooed face. Don Roberto had seen that expression thousands of times, pride fighting against survival. In the streets of El Salvador, choosing wrong, that battle meant ending up dismembered in garbage bags. "Let us go," ordered finally Ramiro to his men, put the Glock in his waist and walked toward the door, not without throwing a last look at Don Roberto. "This does not stay like this, old man." The 6 Moreros left in line, their steps echoing against the polished cement floor. The woman waited until the last one crossed the threshold before turning toward the terrified customers. "You can go," she announced. They no longer needed to be told twice. The bricklayer, the young couple, the 2 drunks from the corner, all left stumbling over each other, leaving crumpled bills on the overturned tables. In less than 1 minute, only Don Roberto, Doña Carmen trembling behind the counter, and the unknown woman remained. "Carmen," said Don Roberto softly, "go to your house. I will close." The waitress looked at him with bulging eyes but nodded. She picked up her purse with trembling hands and left through the back door, the one that led to the alley, where street cats fought for food scraps. Now alone, Don Roberto and the woman observed each other in silence. Outside, the roar of the motorcycles was moving away, taking the Moreros toward some uncertain destination. The soccer match continued broadcasting, oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded. "Do you know who I am?" said the woman. It was not a question. Don Roberto nodded slowly. "The right hand of the shadow. They call you the doctor." She smiled without humor. "It has been a long time since anyone recognized me, Roberto, or should I say, Spectre." The old bartender did not react upon hearing his old war name. Instead, he walked behind the bar and took out 2 clean glasses. He served good rum, the one he kept for special occasions or tragedies. In Soyapango, both things tended to coincide. "That name died 20 years ago," he said, sliding a glass toward her. "Names do not die in this business," responded the doctor, taking the glass, but without drinking. "They only hibernate like snakes." Don Roberto drank his shot in one gulp, feeling the familiar burn go down his throat. The rum tasted like buried memories, decisions taken in dark alleys, blood that never completely washes from the hands. "What does the shadow want?" he asked finally. "The same as Ramiro and his kids," she responded. "The ghost. I already told them no. Do not lie to me, Roberto." The doctor finally took a sip of rum. "You and I know that the ghost is you. The question is, why is everyone looking for you now after so many years?" Don Roberto served himself another shot. Through the fogged window he could see the sleeping neighborhood, the houses of sheet and block where people survived day to day, ignorant of the bloody past that served beer a few blocks away. "Someone talked," he said simply. "Someone always talks," agreed the doctor. "But this time it is different. There is money involved, a lot of money. I do not have any money, but do you know where it is?" She studied him over the edge of her glass. "The money from the cleaning operation. $3 million that disappeared the same night that you—" Don Roberto Spectre remained in silence. He had spent 2 decades building this simple life, this identity of good-natured bartender. He got up at 5 in the morning, opened the diner. At 6, he served breakfasts of beans and plantain to the workers of the neighborhood. At night, beer and superficial conversation, a routine that kept him invisible, irrelevant, forgotten. "My daughter," he said finally. "She does not know anything." The doctor from Rosales Hospital nodded. The doctor. "Pediatric specialist, very respected. It would be a shame if her dad not—" The voice of Don Roberto cut like a razor. For an instant, the doctor saw a flash of the man he had been, the operator who could clean a house full of enemies without blinking, the ghost that appeared and disappeared, leaving only corpses and questions. "It is not a threat," she clarified quickly. "It is a reality. If I could find you, others can too, and not all are going to be as civilized as me." Don Roberto knew she was right. In the world of the Maras, secrets were currency and debts were collected with blood. He had believed that 20 years would be enough for them to forget him. But money has a long memory. "The shadow offers you a deal," continued the doctor. "The money in exchange for protection for you and your daughter. And if such money does not exist, then the shadow has a problem of $3 million, she responded, getting up. "And you have a bigger problem." She left the empty glass on the bar and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she turned one last time. "You have 24 hours to think about it, Roberto. Tomorrow at this time, someone is going to come for an answer. Let us hope that you are the one who gives it, and not your daughter." The door closed with a soft click, leaving Don Roberto alone with the ghosts of his past. On the television, The match had ended. The local team had lost, as always. He served himself a third shot with surprisingly steady hand. The diner smelled of fear and spilled rum, of impossible decisions and borrowed time. He took out his cell phone from his pocket, an old device that he only used for emergencies. He dialed the only number he had saved. "Dad." His daughter's voice sounded sleepy, confused. "It is all good. It is almost 2 in the morning." Don Roberto closed his eyes, memorizing the sound of that voice, the voice of someone who saved lives instead of taking them, who had escaped the cycle of violence that devoured El Salvador, generation after generation. "I just wanted to hear you, my daughter," he responded. "Sorry for waking you up." "Dad, you are scaring me. Did something happen?" 20 years of lies got stuck in his throat. 20 years pretending to be just a boring old man who served beer. 20 years protecting her from the truth. "No, my love, everything is fine. Go back to sleep." "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, more than you will ever know." He hung up before she could ask more questions. In the silence of the empty diner, Roberto Spector Martinez took the decision that he had been postponing for 2 decades. It was time for the ghost to resurrect. One last time, the midday sun punished mercilessly the streets of Soyapango. Don Roberto walked along the main street, blending with the crowd of street vendors, uniformed students, and hurried workers. No one paid attention to the old man in checkered shirt and worn denim pants. He was invisible, as he had learned to do during 2 decades. But today it was different. Today every shadow could hide a hitman. Every motorcycle that passed made him tense imperceptibly. The weight of the .380 pistol in his waist, taken from the hiding place where it had slept 20 years. It was a constant reminder that Roberto the bartender was dying so that Spector could be reborn. He stopped in front of a cell phone store, pretending to look at the devices in the display while observing the reflection of the street. 3 young men with the characteristic loose white shirts were standing on the opposite corner smoking and apparently conversing, but their eyes constantly swept the street. Lookouts. Don Roberto entered the store. The air conditioning was a relief from the infernal heat of March. He bought a new chip from the boy behind the counter, paying in cash without giving names. While waiting, he noticed the newscast on the small television hanging on the wall. 3 bodies found this dawn in the San Jacinto sector. The victims showed signs of torture and the characteristic pattern of Mara executions. The boy followed his gaze. "Every day worse, right? You cannot even go out anymore." Don Roberto nodded without responding. If the kid knew who he was talking to, he would probably faint from fright, or maybe not. In El Salvador, everyone had learned to coexist with death, to normalize it as part of the daily landscape. He left the store with the new chip and continued his route. He needed to arrive at the San Miguelito market before 2. The market was a labyrinth of improvised stalls, bright-colored tarps protecting from the sun, and smells that ranged from fresh cilantro to rotten fish. Don Roberto navigated between vegetable vendors and shouting butchers until he reached a secluded stall where a fat man sold cell phone parts. "Don Chepe," greeted Roberto. The fat man raised his gaze from a disassembled phone. His pig-like little eyes narrowed upon recognizing him. "Roberto, what a miracle to see you around here. I need a favor." Don Chepe looked around nervously, lowered his voice. "I no longer do those jobs, you know. It is not that type of favor." Roberto slid a 50 bill over the work table. "Just information about recent movements in the neighborhood." The fat man pocketed the bill with a practiced movement. "What do you want to know?" "Who leaked my location?" Don Chepe paled. "Roberto, I am not accusing you." The voice of Roberto was calm, but there was steel underneath. "I just need to know who talked." The informant wiped the sweat from his forehead with a dirty rag. The stall smelled of soldering and rancid fear. "About 2 weeks ago," began Chepe in a low voice, "a young guy arrived asking about old stories. He said he was a journalist, that he was writing about the gang wars in the 90s. He offered money for names, dates, and, well, someone talked. I do not know who, I swear. But the young guy started asking specifically about the ghost, about the cleaning operation, about the money that disappeared." Roberto felt a chill run down his spine. Someone had deliberately unearthed his past. But why now? Why after so much time? How was the guy? Young, maybe 25, well-dressed, not like a Marrero. He spoke educated, with big words. He had a strange tattoo on his wrist, like a Chinese symbol or something. Roberto processed the information. It did not sound like someone from the MS-13, maybe police or worse, someone from the government sticking their nose where they should not. Or maybe a scream cut his thoughts. In the main hallway of the market, a woman was screaming while 2 Marreros ripped her purse. The people parted. No one intervened. It was the unwritten law. Do not get involved. Do not look. Keep walking. But Roberto saw something else. The Marreros were not interested in the purse. Their eyes scanned the faces of the passers-by looking. It was a distraction. "I have to go," he said to Chepe. "Roberto, wait." But he had already lost himself among the stalls. He zigzagged through hallways he knew from memory, dodging vendors and buyers. He could feel the pursuit without needing to turn. It was like riding a bicycle. The body remembered the movements, the survival instincts rusty but functional. He exited through a side entrance of the market directly to a crowded street. A collective. The buses, painted in bright colors that were the soul of public transport, stopped right in front of him. Roberto got on, paid the 25 cents to the collector, and made his way to the back. The bus smelled of diesel, human sweat, and the cheap perfume of some street vendor. The cumbia, at full volume from the speakers, made any conversation impossible. Roberto observed through the rear window. 2 motorcycles were making their way through the traffic, following the bus. He got off 3 stops later, in the middle of Independencia Avenue. The traffic was a controlled chaos, perfect for getting lost. He crossed the street, dodging cars, and entered a small shopping center. He knew every exit, every hallway, advantages of a paranoid life. 15 minutes later, he exited through the underground parking. There were no signs of pursuit. He took another collective, this time toward Mexicans. He needed to think, plan, and for that he needed to reach his second refuge. The rented room was in an anonymous building, one of those where no one asks questions if you pay on time. Roberto had maintained this place for years, a life insurance that he hoped never to use. The key was where he had left it, under the 3rd pot in the hallway. Inside, the room smelled of enclosure and dust. A bed, a table, a chair, and a closet with double bottom where he kept the tools of his previous life. False documents, cash, another pistol, and a satellite phone that he had not turned on in a decade. He sat on the bed, the mattress creaking under his weight. Through the dirty window he could see the city extending to the horizon, a sea of sheet and concrete roofs under the merciless sun. Somewhere out there, his daughter would be saving lives, ignorant of the danger that loomed over her. The satellite phone came to life with an electronic beep. Roberto dialed a number that he had memorized 20 years ago. It rang 3 times before they answered. Yes. The voice was cautious, aged, but recognizable. "It is me, rat." A long silence, then, "Fuck, Spectre, I thought you were dead." "Almost. I need your help." "No, no, no. I am clean now, man. I have a little workshop. I fix cars." "Someone found me, rat. Do they know about the money?" Another silence. Roberto could imagine his old companion, probably fatter now, sweating in some shitty workshop. "How much time do you have?" "Until tonight. The shadow gave me 24 hours. Look, Spectre, about the money. You know that there are things that are better left buried." "It is too late for that." Roberto passed his hand over his face, feeling every wrinkle, every year of stolen life. "Do you still have contacts in the armed forces?" "Some. Why?" "Because I think this is not just the money. Someone is moving pieces, and I need to know who. I will find out for you. But Spectre, if you are thinking of getting back in the game, I just want to protect my daughter." "That is what you said the last time, and look how it ended." Roberto hung up. He did not need to be reminded of his failures. He got up and went to the bathroom. The mirror returned the image of a tired old man. When had he aged so much? When the expression lines had become deep furrows, a text message took him out of his thoughts. "Unknown number. Your daughter leaves the hospital at 7, night shift. She always takes the same route." Roberto's hands closed into fists. The message was clear. They knew everything about her routines, her vulnerabilities. The attached photo showed Maria Eugenia leaving Rosales Hospital, her white coat waving as she walked toward her car. Another message, "TikTok ghost." Roberto looked at the clock. 3:47 in the afternoon. He had a little more than 3 hours left before his daughter left the hospital. 3 hours to decide if he would deliver money he did not have, or if he would have to become the monster he had buried 20 years ago again. He put the 380 in his waist, took a baseball cap from the closet and left the room. In the hallway, a gossipy neighbor looked at him with curiosity. Roberto smiled at her, as only an inoffensive old man would know how to do if he knew that he had just crossed paths with death, dressed as a grandfather. The building had a rooftop with a view of the entire city. Roberto climbed the rusty metal stairs, each step echoing in the stairwell. The rooftop door creaked when opening, protesting for the abandonment. Up there, the hot wind moved someone's hanging clothes. Roberto approached the edge, observing. From here he could see Rosales Hospital in the distance, its white structure standing out among the urban chaos. He could also see the escape routes, the blind spots, the places to place snipers, old habits, old skills, old sins. His phone rang. Private number. Roberto was the voice of the doctor. "I hope you are making the right decision. What do you want?" "To verify that you understand the situation. The shadow is not known for its patience. The money exists. Do not lie to me. The 3 million from the cleaning operation. Money from the government that was going to finance death squads. Money that disappeared the same night they killed Colonel Vasquez and his men." Roberto closed his eyes. That night, rain, blood, screams. He had done what he had to do, or so he had told himself during 20 years. If I deliver the money, what guarantee do I have? My word. Your word is worth nothing, the doctor laughed, a sound without joy. In that, you are right, but it is the only thing you have. There is another option, said Roberto, his voice taking a tone he had not used in decades. I can make all of you disappear, starting with you. A silence. When the doctor spoke again, there was respect in her voice, and fear. There is the true Spectre. I knew you were still in there. Do not look for me, doctor. You will not like what you are going to find. 7 in the evening, Roberto. The money or your daughter. It is simple. The line cut. Roberto stayed looking at the phone. Then he threw it over the edge of the building. He saw it fall, crash against the pavement 5 floors below, exploding into pieces of plastic and circuits. A group of pigeons took flight from a nearby building, their wings beating against the burning sky. Roberto observed them move away, envying their freedom. Then he turned and went down the stairs. He had 3 hours. 3 hours to choose between the money he had hidden for emergencies. Not 3 million, nor close, but maybe enough to buy time. Or become the man he had sworn never to be again. The man who cleaned problems, the man who left no witnesses, the man who had died the night his daughter was born. Spectre, the ghost. In the streets of Soyapango, the shadows began to lengthen, and in those shadows, old demons waited for their resurrection. At 6:30 in the evening, Rosales Hospital shone under the last lights of the day, its white walls tinted orange by the dying sun. Roberto was sitting in a cafeteria across the street, a cup of cold coffee in front of him, observing the main entrance of the hospital. He had arrived 2 hours earlier to study the terrain. He identified 3 surveillance points. 2 young Moreros at the bus stop, pretending to wait for transport, and a silver Corolla car parked with polarized windows. Professionals. He expected no less from the shadow. His phone, one new, the third of the day, vibrated. Message from Rat. I found out. The journalist does not exist. It is a decoy. Someone big is moving this. Roberto did not respond. He already suspected it. This was more complex than a simple gang extortion. There was money involved, yes, but also revenge, old accounts to settle. And in the center of everything, him, the ghost who had dared to steal from the corrupt government 20 years ago. At 6:55, the automatic doors of the hospital opened. Maria Eugenia left, still with her white coat, talking on the phone, tall, thin, with her hair tied in a professional bun. She was 32 years old, but she looked young, innocent, not like someone who had grown up with a killer father. Roberto felt the familiar weight of guilt. Everything he had done, steal, kill, disappear, had been for her, so she could study, so she could escape the cycle of violence that devoured El Salvador. And now that same violence threatened to take her away. Maria Eugenia hung up the phone and walked toward the parking lot. The 2 Moreros began to move, following her at a distance. The Corolla started its engine. Roberto left the cafeteria. He crossed the street with a calm step, blending with the pedestrians of the shift change. He arrived at the parking lot 30 seconds after his daughter. She was opening her Honda Civic when Roberto appeared next to her. My daughter. Maria Eugenia jumped, turning abruptly. Dad, you scared me. What are you doing here? I need you to listen to me very well. Roberto spoke quickly, looking over her shoulder. The 2 Moreros were 50 meters away, approaching. You are going to get in your car. You are going to drive as you always do. But instead of going to your house, you are going to go straight to your Aunt Marta's house in Santa Tecla. Do not ask why, just do it. Dad, what is happening? Maria Eugenia, please, trust me. She looked him in the eyes. His daughter was intelligent. She always had been. She saw something in his face that made her nod. Okay, but you are going to explain to me later. I promise. Now go. Maria Eugenia got in her car, started it, and left the parking lot. The silver Corolla followed her immediately. The 2 Moreros stayed standing, confused, talking on their radios. Roberto walked toward them before they could react. The sun had set completely now, leaving that violet half-light that precedes the night. The shadows lengthened like dark fingers. Guys, said Roberto when he arrived in front of them. Both were young, in their 20s, with the characteristic tattoos. Tell the shadow that I want to talk face to face. The tallest, with an MS tattoo on the neck, looked at him with contempt. And who are you, Grandpa? I am the ghost, and tell him that I bring the money." That changed everything. The contempt transformed into caution. The two Moreros looked at each other. "You wait here," ordered the one with the neck tattoo. He took out his cell phone and dialed. The conversation was brief, full of "yes, boss," and as you say, he hung up. "We are going to follow. Get in." A black pickup truck appeared out of nowhere, as if it had been waiting for the signal. Roberto got in the back, flanked by the two Moreros. The vehicle smelled of tobacco and gunpowder, an aroma that brought memories he had tried to suppress. They drove for 20 minutes, penetrating into sectors of Soyapango that even the police avoided after dark. The streets were narrow, the houses piled up against each other, and at every corner there were groups of young people watching them pass. Pure MS-13 territory. Finally, they stopped in front of a two-story house, better maintained than the surrounding ones. It had bars on all the windows and two chained pit bull dogs in the front yard. The animals growled when Roberto got off the pickup. "Inside," indicated one of the Moreros. The house inside was surprisingly normal. Simple but clean furniture, family photos on the walls, smell of freshly cooked food. If it were not for the armed men posted at every corner, it could be the home of any Salvadoran family. They took him to a room on the second floor. The doctor was there, sitting on a leather sofa, but she was not alone. The woman in the chair in front of her was small, maybe 150, about 50 years old. She wore a simple flowered dress and flip-flops. She could be any Salvadoran grandmother buying vegetables at the market, except for the eyes. She had shark eyes, dead, calculating, without mercy. "The shadow," said Roberto. It was not a question. "Sit down, Roberto." Her voice was soft, almost maternal. "Or do you prefer that I call you Spectre?" Roberto sat in a plastic chair. The two Moreros who had brought him stayed behind him, silent and threatening presence. "Did you bring the money?" asked the shadow. "First we talk, then we decide," the woman smiled. "You have balls, I recognize it. That is why you lasted so long in this business. I am no longer in the business. No one leaves the business, Roberto. You know that better than anyone." The shadow served herself a glass of water from a pitcher on the table. The gesture was so domestic, so normal, that it was disturbing. 20 years ago, you and your team received an order. Eliminate Colonel Vasquez and recover $3 million that he was going to use to finance death squads. It was a clean operation, quick. But something went wrong, right, Roberto? He did not respond. The memories of that night assaulted him. The colonel's house in a residential area, the torrential rain, the screams, the blood mixing with the water on the marble floor. "Your team killed the colonel," continued the shadow, "but the money disappeared, and you with it. Your companions thought you had died in the operation, but I know the truth. You planned it all. You killed your own team and kept the money." "It was not like that," said Roberto finally, his voice hoarse. "Ah, no. Then tell me how it was." Roberto closed his eyes. During 20 years, he had kept this secret. He had buried it so deep that he had almost managed to convince himself that it was not real. But lies have a short life, and the truth, no matter how painful, always emerges. "The colonel had a daughter," began Roberto, 9 years old. "She was in the house that night. She should not have been there, but there she was, hidden in a closet, trembling." The shadow leaned forward, interested. "My team." Roberto swallowed saliva. "They said we could not leave witnesses, not one. The orders were clear. Ramon, my companion, took the girl out of the closet. I knew what he was going to do. I had seen him do it before." The silence in the room was absolute. Even the Moreros behind him seemed to hold their breath. "So, I killed him." Roberto opened his eyes, looking directly at the shadow. I put 2 bullets in his head before he could touch the girl. Then I killed the other 2 before they reacted. I took the money, I took the girl, and disappeared. The girl said the doctor softly, "Your daughter, Maria Eugenia." Roberto nodded. "She is not my biological daughter. She is the daughter of Colonel Vasquez. I adopted her illegally. I changed her name. I raised her as mine." The shadow leaned back in her chair, processing the information. Then, to Roberto's surprise, she began to laugh. It was not a cruel laugh. It was genuine, almost amused. "Fuck, Spectre, you are more fucked up than I thought. You killed your team, stole money from the government, and kept the daughter of your target. That is," she looked for the right word, "poetic." "I used the money to raise her," explained Roberto. "Private school, university, medicine, everything she needed to be someone better than I was, than her father was." "Very noble," said the shadow without sarcasm. "But the money that remains, where is it?" "Invested, clean, in an account in her name for when I die." "How much is left?" "500,000? Maybe a little more." The shadow considered this. "It is not 3 million, but it is something. It is all I have. Take it, but leave Maria Eugenia out of this. She does not know anything. And what makes me think that you are not inventing this whole story?" Roberto stood up slowly, taking something out of his pocket. The Moreros behind him tensed. But Roberto only showed a folded paper. The original birth certificate of hers. Real name? Ana Sofia Vasquez Morales. Born on the 12th of April, 1991. Daughter of Colonel Ernesto Vasquez. He handed it to the shadow, who examined it carefully. After a moment, she passed it to the doctor. "It is legitimate," confirmed the doctor. The shadow stood up. Despite her short stature, there was a formidable presence in her. She approached Roberto until she was in front of him. "Do you know what is the most interesting of all this?" she asked. "That the government is still looking for you. They have a reward of $100,000 for information about the cleaning operation. And I know exactly where to find you." Roberto felt the cold of fear run down his spine. "What do you want?" "I want you to work for me." "What?" "You are old, yes, but you are the best cleaner that ever worked in this country, and I have situations that need your type of experience." "No." "Then I hand over your daughter to the government. I tell them who she really is. I tell them that her adoptive father is the most wanted assassin of the 90s. Do you think she will survive that scandal? Her career? Her life?" Roberto clenched his fists. Every fiber of his being screamed to attack, to eliminate the threat, but he was surrounded, outnumbered, and the most important, the shadow was right. "One job," negotiated Roberto, "only one. Then you leave me and her in peace." The shadow smiled. "3 jobs and you have a deal." 2. Done. She extended her small hand. Roberto looked at it for a long moment before shaking it. Her hand felt cold, like death itself. "The first job is tomorrow," said the shadow. "There is a traitor in my organization, someone who is leaking information to the police. I want him dead, clean, without evidence, without witnesses." "Who is he?" The shadow exchanged a look with the doctor. "One of ours is called Ramiro, the same one who went to your cantina last night." Roberto did not show surprise. In the world of gangs, betrayal was common currency. "When?" "Tomorrow at night. We will contact you with the details." The shadow headed toward the door. "Ah, and Roberto, do not try to disappear again. Now I know who you really are, and more important, I know who your daughter really is. One word from me and both are dead." Roberto was escorted out of the house. The night had fallen completely now, and Soyapango had transformed into a labyrinth of shadows and dangers. They left him on a random corner without explanations. He walked for 1 hour processing everything that had happened. He had revealed his deepest secret. He had made a deal with the devil and had accepted to kill again. All to protect a girl who was not his by blood, but was his in all the senses that mattered. When he finally arrived at a bus stop, his phone rang. It was Maria Eugenia. "Dad, I am at Aunt Marta's house. Can you explain to me what is happening?" Roberto leaned against a light pole, exhausted. "Tomorrow, mija, tomorrow I will explain everything to you. Are you in trouble?" "Nothing I cannot handle. Rest." He hung up before she could insist. A collective stopped in front of him, painted bright yellow with stickers of soccer teams. Roberto got on, paid, and sat in the back. Through the window he observed the city pass San Salvador with all its horrors and beauties, with its normalized violence and its resilient people. He had spent 20 years trying to escape his past, and now that past had found him, had trapped him, and was forcing him to be the monster he swore never to be again. The ghost had resurrected, and this time he was not sure he could die again. 3 weeks later, the diner, the refuge, remained closed. A faded sign on the door said, "Closed for remodeling," but the neighbors knew the truth. Don Roberto had disappeared. Some said he had left the country, that he had finally escaped the ghosts that pursued him. Others, more cynical, assumed he lay in some clandestine grave, one more among the thousands of disappeared that El Salvador preferred not to count. The truth, as always, was more complicated. In a modest house in Soyapango, Maria Eugenia Martinez, who now knew that her real name was Ana Sofia Vasquez, prepared coffee in a kitchen that was not hers. The cups trembled slightly in her hands while she waited for the dark liquid to fill the coffee maker. 3 weeks had passed since the night in which her father, the man she had raised as father, had revealed everything to her. The truth about who she really was, about what he had done, about the 20 years of built lies, about a foundation of blood and good intentions. "Do you want sugar?" she asked, although she already knew the answer. Roberto was sitting in the living room looking out the window toward a quiet street where children played soccer. He looked different now. The hair shorter, a 3-day beard that he had not bothered to shave, and something in his eyes that had not been there before. Or maybe it had always been and she simply had never seen it. "Without sugar," he responded as always. Maria Eugenia brought him the coffee and sat in front of him. Between them, on the center table, rested 2 newspapers. The headlines screamed stories that only the 2 of them understood completely. 15 members of MS-13 captured in surprise operation, dismantled extortion network in Soyapango. "Ramiro is dead," said Maria Eugenia. It was not a question. Roberto took a sip of his coffee. "Yes." "Did you kill him?" "Not directly." And it was true. He had provided information. He had pointed out locations. He had facilitated, but he had not pulled the trigger. The police had taken care of that during a shootout that was anything but spontaneous. Maria Eugenia looked at him with a mixture of emotions that she herself could not untangle. Love, fear, disappointment, gratitude, and the shadow imprisoned along with the doctor and other 18. Roberto left the cup on the table. "I gave all the information I had to the prosecutor's office. Locations of safe houses, names of operators, extortion routes, everything. They are going to look for you. They already look for me. The difference is that now the police is on my side." For the moment they had made a deal, explained Roberto. His information in exchange for immunity for him and protection for Maria Eugenia. It was not perfect, but it was better than the alternatives. The cleaning operation would be officially buried as a national security matter, and Roberto Spector Martinez would cease to exist in any official database. And the money? asked Maria Eugenia. My biological father, the colonel, was corrupt. Roberto nodded slowly. One of the worst was going to use those 3 million to finance murders, to clean entire neighborhoods, to eliminate anyone who opposed the government in turn. He was a monster in uniform. But I am his daughter. You are the daughter of the decisions you made yourself, responded Roberto with firmness, not of his blood. You save lives every day. He took them. You are everything opposite to him. Maria Eugenia felt tears burning her eyes. During 3 weeks, she had processed the revelation of her identity, the truth about her origin, the fact that her adoptive father was a reformed assassin. She had gone through denial, anger, emotional bargaining, and now, finally, was arriving at something similar to acceptance. "Do you love me?" she asked. And her voice sounded like that of the 9-year-old girl she had been when Roberto took her out of that closet 23 years ago. "More than anything in this world," responded Roberto. And for the first time in weeks, his eyes moistened. "You are the only good thing I did in my life." She stood up and hugged him. Roberto held her. This old man who had killed dozens, but who had saved one. This man who had stolen millions, but who had used every cent to give her a better life. This monster who had been her guardian angel. "What are you going to do now?" asked Maria Eugenia when they finally separated. "Disappear for real this time." Roberto wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I have contacts in Guatemala, a small town near Lake Atitlan. No one knows me there. And I? You are going to continue being a doctor. You are going to continue saving children. You are going to live the life you deserve. Without voice. With me at a distance always." Roberto took out a new cell phone from his pocket. "This number is satellite, impossible to track. You can call me whenever you want. I will never stop answering." Maria Eugenia took the paper with the number, folding it carefully. "When are you leaving?" "Tomorrow early. One more night. Then, one more night." That night they cooked together as they used to when she was little. Cheese pupusas with curtido, rice, beans. Roberto taught her again the trick so that the pupusas came out perfectly sealed, although she knew it. It was just an excuse to be close, to touch, to remember. They ate mostly in silence, letting the familiar flavors speak for them. Outside the city prepared for the night, the street vendors shouted their last offers. The buses passed roaring. Life continued indifferent to the personal dramas that developed in thousands of homes. After dinner, Maria Eugenia washed the dishes while Roberto. Another ancient ritual, comforting in its simplicity. "Do you know what is the strangest?" said Maria Eugenia, passing him a wet plate. "That after all you told me, after knowing who you really are, who I really was, nothing changed." "How so?" "You continue being my dad. I continue being your daughter. The rest is just history." Roberto put the last plate in its place. "I wish it were that simple." "But it is," she insisted. "You did terrible things, but you also did something beautiful. You saved me. You gave me a life. Does not that count for something? I do not know if it balances the scale. Maybe not, but it is something." The next morning, Roberto left before dawn. He left a note on the kitchen table next to a safety box with the necessary documents to access the bank account he had mentioned. It was not much, but it would be enough for emergencies. The note said simply, "Thanks for these 20 years. I love you, Dad." Maria Eugenia found it when she woke up at 6. She read it 3 times, memorizing every word, before folding it carefully and putting it in her purse. That day, she went to the hospital as always, checked patients. She saved a life when a child arrived in cardiac arrest, filled forms, took terrible coffee from the break room machine. The routine was an anchor that kept her sane. During her lunch break, she saw the news on her phone. More arrests of the MS-13. The government celebrated a historic victory against the gangs. The president gave statements about zero tolerance and recovery of the country. No one mentioned the anonymous informant who had made all this possible. No one talked about the ghost who had resurrected only to disappear again. The story, as always, was written for the headlines, not for the truth. 1 week later, Maria Eugenia received a text message from the satellite number. "I arrived well. The lake is beautiful. You should visit it someday." She responded, "Maybe I will. Take care. You too, mija." 2 months later, in a cantina in Santa Tecla, a group of Maria Eugenia's friends celebrated her 33rd birthday. There were laughs, toasts, shared stories. Someone asked about her father. "He is traveling," she responded with a smile that almost reached her eyes. "You know how old people are, restless." The conversation continued, flowing toward other topics. No one noticed when Maria Eugenia looked at her phone and saw a new message. "Happy birthday. I send you a hug from wherever happiness is." She wrote back, "Happiness is knowing that you are well." In Soyapango, the diner, the refuge, finally reopened under new administration. A young family bought it. They painted the walls, changed the name to New Dawn. The old customers gradually returned, accepting the change as they accepted everything in El Salvador with resignation and hope mixed. Doña Carmen, the waitress, still worked there. Sometimes when she served beer at the bar, she looked at the place where Don Roberto used to stand and wondered what had become of him. But she never asked out loud. In El Salvador there are things that are better not to know. The violence continued. Of course, arresting 15 Marreros did not stop the tide. Others took their places, new faces with the same tattoos, repeating the same cycles. But there was a small respite, a brief pause in the sector where the shadow had operated. The extortions decreased temporarily. The families breathed a little more calmly. Small victories in a war that never ends. In Guatemala, in a town where no one asked names or made many questions, an old man rented a little house with a view to the lake. He let his beard grow completely white. He wore straw hats and fished in the mornings. The locals knew him as Don Felipe, the retired Mexican who sought peace. In the afternoons, he sat on his porch with a warm beer and looked at the water. Sometimes he thought about the lives he had taken, the decisions he had made, the price of redemption. But more often he thought about a 9-year-old girl hidden in a closet, about how a monster had decided for once in his life to do something good. And he thought about that same girl, now a woman, saving lives in a hospital in San Salvador, his daughter, not by blood but by choice, by love, for the only act of genuine kindness in a life stained red. Was it worth it? Could 20 years of fatherhood balance decades of violence? Roberto did not know the answer, but he knew this. He had saved a life that mattered, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The sun set over Lake Atitlan, painting the sky with oranges and purples. Tomorrow would be another day with its own impossible questions and its own insufficient answers. But for now, in this moment, an old assassin drank beer and observed the beauty of the world he had helped to stain. And in San Salvador, a young doctor finished her shift, knowing that despite everything, she had been loved. What would you have done?